right, welcome to the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. My name is Ginny Urich. I am the founder of 1000 Hours Outside, and I feel like my life took this amazing turn for the better because I got to read this fantastic new book recently called, it's not a new book, actually, it's been around for a while, but new to me book called Beyond Winning, Smart Parenting in a Toxic Sports Environment. And I'm here with one of the authors, Luis Fernando Llosa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jenny. Really excited to talk more and spread the word about how parents can provide their kids with a more nurturing, exciting, and critically fun uh, experience when they're venturing out into both unstructured play, semi-structured play, and organized play and sport.
Mm, the book, it blew me out of the water. And we'll talk about that quite a bit. But let me introduce you real quick. Luis is a writer, editor, speaker, and investigative reporter. So, what an interesting line of work. I always love learning about lines of work that I haven't really ever thought of before. So, you worked for Sports Illustrated as a general reporter, you worked at Fortune and Money magazines. Your primary passion is youth sports, both privately and professionally. You've coached soccer for decades. You co wrote Sins of a Father, a Sports Illustrated exclusive about a 13-year-old inline skater injected with HGH and testosterone by his father. It's very interesting topics. They're a little bit out of my purview because I'm not, like I say, sports ball. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's just interesting to be exposed to um, things that I maybe not had thought about. And you've been on more than 100 national and local television and radio appearances, including CBS Evening News, CNN in Espanol, Fox News, Fox and Friends, Greta Van Susteren, Nancy Grace, all these things, NPR, ESPN Radio to discuss steroid investigations and other sports related issues. So, and also, we don't connect on the sports necessarily, but you do have 5 kids, and so do we. So we
Yeah.
definitely we connect
Fabulous
there.
five.
Yeah, a father of 5. So you've also so you have these books. You have this Beyond Winning Smart Parenting in a Toxic Sports Environment that you co-wrote with Kim John Payne, which is how I ended up here, and Scott Lancaster. And then you have another book coming out with Kim John Payne that is phenomenal on August 9th, Emotionally Resilient Tweens and Teens. And then you also have an organization that you founded called Whole Child Sports. Um, so, so tell us a little bit about Whole Child Sports and maybe your journey to this Beyond Winning book.
So yes, the Whole Child Sports organization is basically the efforts of Kim, myself, and Scott Lancaster to get the word out to parents that they can chill out and just sort of create a more nurturing and fun environment for their kids, and that because there are many parents are like this, they want their parents to become their kids to become athletes. Uh, you know, you can get there from here without compromising the kids' passion for sport and love of sport, and you can do it while also developing their negotiating, social emotional skills, and preparing them for outer life. The bottom line in the whole world of youth sports, which has now become a $19 billion business annually, is that only a very tiny sliver of a very tiny sliver of kids make it even to college sports. And of those, even fewer become professionals. So all this focus on preparing them and overtraining them is having counterintuitively a negative impact on a wide group of
Wow,
kids. And
right.
then there are all the other kids who, because high school is structured with, the best players getting time and playing on a team, and very sort of weak, not so good gym time or other time for kids, the rest of the kids, all of the kids who need activity, physical activity, and need the challenges of learning the skills that sports can provide, aren't getting enough activity. They're not getting
Mm,
1,000 hours outside. They're not even getting maybe 5 hours inside in a gym at
right,
school. And this
right.
doesn't work for the health of America, you know?
Mm. Yeah, you're talking about the whole child. And well, so can you tell what's the path? Where do the relationships intertwine? So I'm kind of always interested in those
Yes.
stories. To co-write a book with someone is a really cool thing. So where did y'all meet and you and Kim and Scott?
Okay. So I met Scott because he had me on a show that he was doing on youth sports on Sirius XM radio. And I was, breaking some stories on steroids and other societal ills. I did the story on a kid named Danny Almonte, who was a Dominican kid who was a pitcher, and he pitched a perfect game and was on the verge of winning the Little League World Series, which is televised on ESPN and is a
Hmm.
big deal all over the world for baseball enthusiasts. And in fact, I was in the Dominican Republic learning that he was 2 years older than he was supposed to be. So basically he was cheating.
Oh,
It became a
wow.
massive scandal because while he was winning and beating with his team of kids from the Bronx, who Rudolph Giuliani, the mayor at the time, was touting as this great, you know, Latino team from the Bronx, from rugged, and they overcome everything. They were beating teams from Florida, from Japan, from all over the world, and it turned out that he was cheating. But it wasn't really the kid that was cheating; it was his parent and the
Right,
manager who had set this up.
right.
And that was one of the moments when I said, "Oh my God, these kids are just being used and treated
Ah,
abusively by parents." I've
yeah,
seen that all across, the world, like you said, with this inline skater who, at the age
yeah.
of 12 and 13, is being injected with
Well, and
steroids.
what's sad, I think what's sad, and to your point is it was not the fault of the child, but that's the name. That's the name that everyone's hearing. They're
Yeah,
hearing Danny. They're not
yeah.
hearing the name of the manager. They're hearing the name of the kid. So you met Scott through that, and then how about Kim?
And Kim came to my five kids went to the Rudolph Steiner School in New York City, which is a Waldorf school.
Hmm.
And Kim came and get a talk about boys and overwhelm. I loved the
Wow.
talk, and I approached him at the end of the talk and said, "Hey, have you any interest in sports and what's going on with kids in that realm? Because it's a pretty crazy situation going on."
Hmm.
And he told me absolutely. He had been a high profile youth soccer player
Hmm.
in Australia, and he knew people in Australia in the Australian side of the crazy let's be elite athletes world. And he'd also coached basketball and other sports in the Waldorf system as an educator. And
Hmm.
we just clicked
Yeah.
on our belief systems aligned, our um, just concern for childhood.
Mm.
His big phrase is "too much too soon," and that's what I was
Right.
seeing in the sports world. Too
Right.
much too soon, and the many ways in which it was detrimental to kids.
Yeah.
So I got these two guys together, and we started talking, and we developed this idea of a book that would both call out the problems in youth sports and also provide solutions, because we read a lot of good books by Tom Ferry from ESPN and others about Mark Hyman, who wrote about kids being injured, including his own son, and who tells us at the end of his book that Tom Brady's parents, the greatest football quarterback of all time, wouldn't let him play football until he was in high school because they wanted to protect him. So this
Wow.
whole idea that a kid has to be training from the age of gestation,
No, right,
in
right.
order to be
Yeah.
a great elite athlete, has also been debunked in many different
Mhm.
ways.
Yeah.
So we decided, let's write a book that, yes, calls out all these ills and explains them and delves into them and gives anecdotal examples, but also more importantly, provides parents with solutions.
Yeah.
So it's structured as 7, 8 chapters that pose a conceptual problem or a conceptual issue in youth sports, and then has a story about how parents dealt with one, and then what we call QDSs: question, discussion, solution. And where the
Mm,
three of us, a question that a parent has asked one of us or all of us, and we've been all over the
mhm,
country, so we've had millions of questions, but generally the questions become, similar. And then a discussion between us about the question, and then our suggested solutions.
mm.
And that's
I,
the
you know,
structure of the book.
you and I met now. You and I have connected through Kim,
Yes.
because Kim has been on our podcast to discuss his book, Simplicity Parenting, which has changed the lives of families all over the world. And
Yeah.
also the new book that you wrote together coming out on August 9th, Emotionally Resilient Tweens and Teens. And what was striking to me is that, this is not a book that I probably would have picked up on my own, beyond winning smart parenting in a toxic sports environment. But there is so much in here for sports, obviously, but for life, for parenting. That's what I one of the biggest takeaways I came away. You talk about the power of play. You talk about what's coming. How is society changing and how can we prepare our kids for it? You talk about being bored. You talk about when we're overly invested. You talk about conversation, even, how should we converse with our kids when in sticky situations, about learning from failure, about what is success, about the gift of anticipation, all of these things. I got so much out of this book, Luis, for myself, for my own parenting. It went right up to the top of my list of books, of parenting books, because you definitely give answers for sports, and I think that is something. If it's a $19 billion a year industry, obviously this is something that parents are it's very pertinent for parents today. But beyond the sports, you just offered, there's so much in this book. So um I emailed Kim immediately. I'm so thankful, because I might have not picked it up, and I got so much out of it. So um let's start, since you are a sports, that's your primary passion. Let's start there. So you talk about the steep human cost of the way that sports for youth, the way that it's being ran today. So can we talk about the cost, like the developmental stages that are skipped and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So one of the things that struck me as people talk about great athletes like Wayne Gretzky, Diego Maradona, for soccer from Argentina, Wayne Gretzky from Canada, Pele in soccer, and pretty much all the great baseball players who have come from places like the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico and Venezuela, is that um, they learned what makes them incredible, creative, dynamic athletes is not what they learned from command oriented coaching. They
Mm,
did not learn it because their parents could afford or were interested in, at the age of 4, 5, 6, regimenting their time so that they could learn drills and skills to make them great athletes.
yeah.
Some of them did later on in their lives at the age of 15, 16, 17, engage in all that activities. In fact, they probably all did. But what made them great, and I'm only using the elite as an example because it can be beneficial to every kid, even the kid who only plays sports for a year, um, is that they had time to play freely in an unstructured way, both in their sport and with other sports, and also with nature. And this is the
Mm,
key to me. 1,000 hours outside is a fantastic concept, a necessary way for kids to colloquy with nature, to colloquy with themselves, to learn about the world. But what happens, Ginny, if the 1,000 hours outside are governed,
mm,
controlled,
right.
timed, organized, structured by parents who think they're doing the best for their kids, but are counterintuitively uh, dumbing down the opportunities that they have to learn. So free play is the beginning of it, and it should be happening at the age of 5 and at the age of 50. But certainly in the early stages, neuroscientists, child development specialists, all agree kids need to play, and they need to play together with each other. And parents should not be controlling the atmosphere. What
Mhm.
it does to certain athletes, and this is where I went down to North Carolina and talked to Jenny Levy, who has won 3 national championships as a women's lacrosse coach at the University of North Carolina. And she blew me away. I mean, if there's a way to to marry Zen and coaching, she does it.
Wow.
And of course, when I interviewed her, we had a camera going, and I was also interviewing for her for this book. I saw the list of books she had on coaching on her, and there was one on the Zen of coaching and all kinds of other stuff. So what she understood is that the social and emotional component of learning and coaching is critical, and that creativity happens when you don't structure things. What she said to me, and we quoted in the book, it blew me away, is, and she's talking as a coach who can get the best players on the planet in the sport that she wants to, develop for that university. Kids are like overbred dogs, mimicking the drills that we run in practice. They aren't wired to think creatively. They do what they know, what's safe. So
Wow.
it's incredible, right? She said to me one day early in a season, she walked by a campus green in North Carolina, and some of her girls, prospective players, current players, were 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 hanging out with their sticks, their lacrosse sticks, and she said, "Hey guys, why don't you show me some tricks? Why don't you do something fun?" And they said, "Ooh, well, what do you mean, coach? Do you want us to run an overlap? Do you want us to,
Mm.
to drill pass?" And they named all these terms, which I'm not as familiar with it as I am with other sports for lacrosse specific segments. She said, "No, just have fun." They couldn't. They didn't know what she
Wow.
meant, and they were nervous about not showing her their best.
Wow.
That taught me that these kids have been trained from the age of 5, 6, 7, and they're not getting a chance to learn creatively. Wayne Gretzky, he did it on a pond in his backyard
Yeah.
for the first 5, 10 years of his life. Diego Maradona did it in on a cement little field called where he played futbolito, and Pele did it in a favela where the streets are uphill, downhill, around hill. There's dirt everywhere. The ball is a rolled up rag tied with
Mhm.
rope. But all
Wow.
these different sort of challenges that these guys faced, a pond is rough, right? It's not perfect. Is that they learned how to move differently. They learned how to pass creatively. They learned in small spaces how to develop fast twitch muscles. All these different things happened. So what we do to our kids, which is a real shame, is that at the age of 4, 5, 6, I've interviewed parents all over the country and in other places in the world. They're structuring every second of their kids' time. It's too much too soon, as Kim would say. And what we really want them to do is go out and have fun. What
Yeah.
happens when kids play? They have to deal with each other. If there's no parent, right? If there's a parent, that the parent's like, okay, Joey, you shouldn't be doing that. Jenna, why did you kick the ball out? You're supposed to pass it to the right. And really, what they should be doing is figuring all this out for themselves. Because when kids play alone as peers, a whole new situation arises. It's my ball. I want to play goalie. Well, I'm the goalie. No, but I want to play goalie. All right, all right, all right. Well, forget it, man. I'm going home. If I'm not a goalie, I'm going home. The kid starts to walk away with the ball, and there's no other ball. So now, what do the other kids need to do? They have to figure out how to negotiate. Okay, look. You can be goalie for the first 10 minutes, and we'll switch. Now they're learning skills that they're gonna use throughout life, which is
Yeah.
negotiation, understanding and reading social and emotional situations, and this all helps
Right.
them become creative and nimble people.
Mm.
Because as we say in the book, we change careers, we change jobs, also even careers every 2 to 3 years. And we need to be able to figure things out. So if you go into the corporate world and say, it's my ball, I'm going home, they don't want you on their team. If you go to the corporate world and get all upset and run to the bathroom and cry because somebody said something to you, that's a problem. You're not your best self.
Mm.
We learn through this unstructured free play
Wow.
and even semi-structured. What has been fascinating to me is what I see is that parents, I kind of equate it to washing dishes. We like to wash dishes. Why? Because there's a set number of dishes. We wash them, we put them away, we feel good about ourselves. So I remember here on Central Park, a bunch of kids from my school were having a great little football game going. And there was the parents were sitting aside and we were talking. Then a dad who didn't usually come came, and he went right up to the kids and he says, all right, kids, let's get this better organized. Okay, let's pick fair teams. Now, what the kids would do if the score was lopsided was they would fight with each other and say, that's no fair. And they would figure out what fair teams were:
Mm.
negotiation,
Yep.
emotional intelligence, figuring things out. This parent wanted to structure it all. And that's what is done in coaching. We train them to
Yeah.
the nth degree, and they don't know how to figure things out. What's even worse is we yell at them the whole time. Go to
Wow.
any sporting event and you'll see coaches are acting like the brain, yelling at
Wow.
kids, move to the left, Jenna, make a tackle, Jose, you're not in the right position, while the game is going on. The
Wow.
great coaches like John Wooden in basketball and any great coach teaches kids during practice and talks to them privately about what they should do. They don't scream out instructions throughout a game, because you
Wow.
don't learn how to think for yourself. You don't
Wow.
learn the creativity of figuring it out and executing.
Yeah. Oh, you start the whole book by saying we all want what's best for our children. And but then when you and so we think it's almost been sold to us, right? That what's best is to put these kids in these travel sports and to give them every advantage, possible when they're young as it relates to sports. But then you listen to you talk even just for a few minutes and you say, "Oh, wait, maybe that's not what's best for them." And so it's so interesting. I love this part about well, you say starting at a very young age, there's always been an adult telling them what to do, where to stand, and when to move. And so your point is that um, this is making it so that kids, they don't have the ability to think on their feet and they can't be
Exactly.
creative, and that it's seeping. I think this is when I said at the beginning, you got a parent, maybe they have a child that's not super sports inclined, or they've got even young children, 2, 3. This is a fantastic book to read because what you talk about is how it seeps into other areas. You brought up a Harvard professor of bioengineering and applied physics. So this is out of the sports realm now, that it
Yep.
takes years to deprogram the students because all they know how to do is what someone has told them to do.
And these are A students. These are the best of the best, arriving at one of the toughest schools where if you didn't get a 1600 on your SAT, good luck even being, uh, you know, considered. And if you did, you may not get in anyway, right?
Right.
Another person who really sort of shocked me with this is, and it's so broad to the whole parenting world, right? We talked about creativity, we talked about negotiation skills, we talked about social emotional IQ, but what about impulse control, right?
Oh,
That's the
yeah.
one thing we want to teach our kids, because that's going to be either, if they don't have it, detrimental to them throughout their lives in everything, not just sports, not just a job, relationships with spouses. How do they teach and model for their own kids, right? And the quote that I love, which I'll, if you will, I'll read for you, is
Yeah.
from an early childhood teacher named Erica Christasis and her husband Nicholas, who was a professor of medicine and sociology at Harvard. And what she says is, what they say is, One of the best predictors of school success is the ability to control impulses. Every day where we work, we see young students struggling with the transition from home to school. They're all wonderful kids, but some can't easily share or listen in a group. Wow, it
Mm.
sounds like most of our kids, right?
Right,
Some
right,
have
for
impulse
sure.
control problems and have trouble keeping their hands to themselves. Yes, check. Others don't always see that actions have consequences. Double check. A few suffer terribly from separation anxiety. Yes. We're not talking about preschool children here. We're
Mm.
talking, this is her quote, right? These are Harvard undergraduates who we teach and advise. They
Wow.
all know how to work, but some of them have never learned how to play. And it's through play. The other thing that really shocked me in the research for this book, I met and read the book of a guy named Mike Lanza, who I recommend.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you know him.
The Playborhood, he's Playborhood, right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I was traveling for some sports reporting thing, and I came upon him, and I met up with him over the phone. But I was right there near Menlo Park where he lived, and this is one of the weirdest things in a transgenerational shift for the worse, which is that when I was a kid, and I'm assuming when you were a kid, and it also depends on your setting, but at least in the city and sometimes often in the country too. When I was a kid, you went out and you played, and then you came back at night for dinner,
Yep.
right? And when you played, it was with other kids, and you had to be friendly with them, and you had to connect with them. And if you didn't, you weren't allowed. They said they shunned you. So, like we talked about earlier with the free play, you learned and dealt, but there was no adults saying, separating people when they fought. They fought and then they made up and they became friends again and they figured things out, right?
Yeah.
And playgrounds were full. Everybody was outside. You didn't even, there was no need for a book called A Thousand,
It's
Hours
the
Outside.
truth. It
It
is
just,
the truth.
it just didn't come in anybody's mind. And so what really freaked me out is when I found out that Mike Lanza wrote the Playborhood Manifesto. In other words, this dad was driven to create in his backyard and his front yard cool sort of stuff and spaces so that the neighborhood kids could come and hang out and learn together and have fun together and play outside with different tools. He had a skate ramp, he had this, he had that, it could be a tree house, or maybe he taught them how to build a tree house. But they were doing the stuff that as kids we did.
Hmm.
When I was a kid in Peru, I played with bottle caps alone for 5 hours straight. That helped me develop imagination
Yeah.
and like figuring out. Talk about the gift of boredom, which is one of Kim's great quotes, and we talk about at length here.
Hmm.
Boredom is where things actually happen
Yeah.
for kids, right? Your kid is bored. Okay, well, we'll take you to piano lesson on Thursday. We structure kids' days so that they don't have any moments of boredom, because we think boredom is, the devil's the devil's possibility, the devil's the window through which the devil walks and does whatever. And that the fact is, boredom can be where kids just blossom into stuff that they invent. And yes, if they watch a lot of TV and movies, they'll recreate stuff from the TV. But if you can limit their screen time, or even if they're just learning how to be creative, they'll take the TV show and not force themselves and each other to mimic it exactly, but develop new stuff with it. So
Hmm.
Pokemon was a problem in our Waldorf class, because kids were structuring their whole play around it, and we were more into kids playing with sticks and stones in Central Park. But what did happen is that the kids who were not exposed to it and questioned it started helping the other kid develop really cool ways of like their own world of Pokemon, unrelated to the scripted one that
Hmm.
they were learning. And that's where unscripted and scripted meet, and imagination blossoms. You want
Right.
your kid to jump off their couch wearing a cape. Yes, they're sort of being a Batman or a Superman, and maybe you don't want them to mimic Disney that closely, but then they're creating their own moments of crisis and resolution, and they're
Hmm.
having fun. You want
Right.
jocularity, you want flashlight tag at night at camp. where nobody can see each other and you have to figure things out. You don't
Mhm.
want, an adult saying, okay, at 3:55 we do this. And so the best times that my kids have had are when we used to go to Maine and they played with pine cones, or I was playing with bottle caps. I had Fanta, Crush, I had Pepsi, and I lined them up into little armies and they fought each other. And I would lost in this.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
so then we have a guy like Mike Lanza forced to create a manifesto saying, I want my kids to play with each other. I don't want adults to govern it. Or we have a wonderful tag team of Ginny and her husband Scott getting together and saying, we've got to do something we've got to share what is happening already with our kids, which is that they're outside and we're making sure that they're outside and away from screens. Let's do 1,000 hours outside.
Mhm.
The irony in the fact that
Well,
you need
it's
to do that?
interesting.
Wow.
It's interesting because Kim said when we talked, and this is something that really opened my eyes. I mean, the coming from this premise of we all want to do what's best for our kids, but that as a society we're sort of headed the wrong direction. And when you say, I had this one highlighted on my page too, that one of the best predictors of school success is the ability to control impulses, and they're learning how to do that when they play imaginatively. But if we're in this framework of wanting to do the best for our kids, he talks about how by going backwards, we're really going forwards.
Yes.
By creating the playborhood, by making sure that we're including self directed time for our kids to have these experiences, we're setting them up for the future. And this is when I talk about how your book is so overarching, it's one for any parent. You go through what's coming. What is coming in the job market, the stark reality. You've got an amazing quote in here about how kids are going to have to be prepared to reinvent themselves. So, can we talk about, you mentioned it briefly at the beginning, careers are shorter. What's coming for our kids and what are they going to need?
They're going to need to be creative, be able to figure things out. They're going to need to have the skills. Um, Basically, they're going to need to um, peer mentorship is a huge issue, like teaching each other. And if you have a coach or a referee or a parent instructing everybody, then the peer mentorship possibilities don't happen. And
Interesting.
so, and even as a coach, what I've learned, uh, and here's something that's kind of out of the box too. Every coach, and this is okay, let's talk about every coach. I'm talking about sports, but again, like you say, it's in all aspects of life because it can be in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. It can be in swimming. It can be at a camp that's a nature camp. Um, every coach has a kid who seeks all the attention, is problematic, or maybe even is so good and
Mm.
so beyond what the other kids his age are that they're frustrated and critical of the other kids and are angry. Like they're indignant. Why can't you uh you know tie this knot really quickly? I learned it when I was 4. And these kids become aggressive with
Mm.
others, right? And you get into potentially bullying and other issues. What I learned in coaching was to take that kid who has all that energy and all that skill, but has no social understanding and empathy, key word, for the other kids who are not at the stage that she or he is to say, listen, I need a team manager. Listen, I need an assistant coach. And you'll be amazed at the transformation from
Wow.
aggressive to collaborative and mentoring that happens with that child. That's a specific example. I remember
Mhm.
I remember a kid. I've done this 4 or 5 times now with kids, even more. But you give them a role of responsibility, and they start to learn, and they'll see like if they criticize the kid who they're teaching, the kid won't want to do it. So they start
Yeah.
they do what they normally do. It doesn't work. They have to figure out a way to affirm as well as teach. And then they do that, and then they become better. So better better at handling at be better empathetic beings, better at social situations, but also better teachers and better team members. And that
Mm.
translates to every job and every
Right.
social situation, from being a parent to being a member of a team, a corporate team, to being a member, to pretty much anything you do. And so you take a kid who could have been a bully, aggressive, entitled, and indignant because of their high skill level, and you transform them into empathetic, helpful,
Wow.
peer oriented, peer mentor, and that's when they become an actual true leader. And all this talk about how sports are wonderful for kids developing skills like leadership and teamwork, it's doing the opposite.
Mm.
It's creating bully like entitled kids.
Wow.
Even the ones who could be great leaders are not becoming it because they're missing that component.
Yeah.
And so this kind of simple example, there are also other examples like um, different kids grow at different stages and develop certain areas. Some are more physically talented, some are less, some are extrovert, some are introvert. You don't stick an introverted child of yours onto a soccer, baseball, basketball team, throwing them to the social wolves and expect that they're going to stay afloat. They won't, right? What you do with them is you say, hey, let's go for a hike, right? Build their confidence that way. Hey, let's go for a bike ride. Let's learn how to bike. Let's why don't and then a little later, why don't you try tennis? Team sport, but not really. You're up to your own devices, right? Or golf, or longer bike rides.
Hmm.
One of the most interesting things that one of the key things in this whole peer mentoring issue, and this is something that Scott got into a lot. I love this because he, at one point, was dealing a lot with skateboarders and snowboarders. And on Whole Child Sports, we have a video. It's been up for a long time with Shaun White, the greatest
I saw that
snowboarder
there.
in
Yeah,
history,
that's so cool.
right? But he, but what we learned about learning with skateboarders. So a lot of parents are like, oh my God, my kid's skateboarding. I don't know who he's interacting with. You know, he's always getting in trouble with the police because he's skateboarding in the wrong places.
Hmm.
But what skateboarders do, and this is fascinating, is they take a problem like how to learn to do an ollie or how to jump onto a bench and then jump off while still on your skateboard, or how to jump up, flip your skateboard, and land on it as it's returned to wheels on the ground. And they'll practice that. They'll practice it for an hour. Sorry, doesn't work. They'll practice it for a day. Sorry, doesn't work. They'll practice it for 3 months. But when they're practicing, are they doing it alone? No. There are other guys who take turns and they're
Mm.
saying, yeah, dude, whoa, that was cool. But, balance your weight on the back a bit more as you're coming down. And so they're teaching
Wow.
each other and they're doing great. They're having fun. What kid do you know in today's society, there are very few, will spend 3 hours trying to do something and fail repeatedly, like 50, 100, 200 times in those 3 hours and still keep doing it?
And they're falling. I mean, a
And
lot of
falling
times
and
they're
getting
getting
hurt
hurt.
and getting hurt.
Hmm.
That's a kid who really wants to learn.
Hmm.
And other kids with him are teaching him. And they're being cool about it. They're not putting him down because he didn't score the goal when the goal, he had a wide open shot, or he didn't, make the basket at the end when it was just a layup. They're actually supporting and helping.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's
you
where
just,
all that great learning happens and that great
yeah.
creativity happens. So you're thinking, oh my God, my kid wants to do skateboarding. I wish he was doing piano lessons today, doing dancing tomorrow, and on that travel basketball team. No, he's out there for 5 hours doing God knows what with his skateboard. He's actually learning to be the most creative, peer oriented, teamwork oriented kid you'd ever ask for.
Yeah. I
So
loved your
counterintuitive.
I loved your part in the book about action sports. So, you say they're learning self-coaching, focus. There's not instant gratification. They're learning balance, agility, coordination, and they're learning how to learn for mastery. And that part about learning from peers, I mean, all of these things are lifelong they're going to benefit you for a life, to know how to look around and to take feedback from the people around you and see what are they doing that's working that I could be doing in my life. So I did love that part about action sports and those lifelong benefits. There was a topic in this book that I had never thought about, in terms of sports, but also in terms of life. You you talk about the gift of boredom. That's one thing I think that Kim John Payne talks a lot about too. And I did love this sentence about boredom where it says, "When our children are bored, we have not failed them." I think that's a huge statement because I do think a lot of times that we have failed. That boredom is a gift. But another gift you talk about is the gift of anticipation. I never thought about that in terms of my parenting. So you sort of relate it with letting kids wait, letting the excitement build, you know, um, in terms of joining teams. So can we talk a little bit about the gift of anticipation and, well, you have this statement where you say exchange the gift of participation for the gift of anticipation.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because we give our kids everything. We try to anyway when we
Mm,
can. And what better way can we uh, prepare our kids, for example, if they want to play on a soccer team or if they want to buy an incredible fishing rod? Do we hand them the fishing rod? Do we sign them up for $4,000 for travel soccer? Or do we say, look, um, we want you to do this. This is great, but why don't we do this? Why don't you earn half the money to buy the rod? You earn, a fifth of the money to enter the sports thing by getting this summer job or helping me with this or that. And then we'll see if you still want to do it with that money. And so they want it, they work for it, they earn it for themselves, and they feel both empowered and invigorated by their own pivotal participation in
right.
getting what they want. Are there other
Right.
areas of that you were struck by?
I thought it was just really this concept of having something to look forward to. And I haven't heard many people talk about that. And I haven't thought of that much actually in my own parenting, and so to have I think sometimes if we reframe instead of, if our child is 6 and everyone else is joining the soccer team,
Yes.
and so then we feel bad or we feel guilty or we feel like the oddball out. But to sort of look at it from a different perspective, that we're also teaching them that that having something to look forward to at the right age and stage is also a really special part of life too. And within all of that, one of the things that you did talk about and you have on your website and is in the book as well are that there are these stages, and
Yeah.
that you have to make sure that the kids are going through these stages because otherwise they're missing key developmental periods, to learn those flexible things or how to get along. Do you want to tell people what those a little bit about those stages?
Yes, yes. I mean, basically, you have. I'm just looking for my notes here because here they are. So um, now, before we even touch on this briefly, I want to mention a friend of mine, quickly. A friend of mine was telling me about his 4-year-old kid, and everybody else was doing soccer. So he put him in soccer, and the kid uh, did it for a while and then didn't want to do it anymore. And his brother didn't either. And so the guy said, oh my God, I guess they don't like organized sports. They made all these decisions about what their kids at the age of 4 had
Mhm.
shown them through this effort that they made. And then the next summer, another kid moved in, or no, 2 summers later, a kid moved in from somewhere else as a neighbor. And that kid was on a team and liked to play sports. And so they started playing in the backyard with that kid and they loved it. So where he's like, I don't want to play soccer, I don't like it. It was probably because he was
Mm,
smaller and felt intimidated, or didn't do something right and got yelled at by the parent of another. Whatever happened, it didn't work for the kid at that stage. He just wasn't ready
mm,
for it. But when he met another kid and they started playing together for fun in the backyard, and then he saw him with his jersey and all excited, and he talked about the game, and the kid was a little older now and maybe had come more into his body, because different kids develop into their bodies and into that coordination at different times, and even fall out of coordination as they get really tall suddenly at the age of, for girls maybe 11, 12, 9, 10 even, for boys maybe more like 14, 15, 16, where they were really super coordinated, and now they're tripping over themselves instead of
Hmm.
making a perfect baskets from the 3-point range or whatever. So it happened naturally, and the kid loved it and joined and still plays soccer to this day. You know what I
Well,
mean?
that's a point too. You bring that up in the book.
Yeah.
What is the goal? What is the lifelong goal? And when you say kids, sports can enhance your life forever. You're still involved with sports and action sports or team sports. People can play those for the length of their life and find fulfillment and enjoyment, but that kids are quitting. I think I saw the statistic, 70% are quitting by the age of 13.
Yes, and they're quitting for various reasons. It's no longer fun, they say. They
Mhm.
have insanely sophisticated injuries that used to be the provenance of elite athletes. Elite athletes used to get the kind of MCL, ACL, tears in their knees, Tommy John surgery, and kids are getting it now at the age of 13, 15, 16. I've talked to doctor
Wow.
specialists, pediatric uh, uh, orthos all over the place about this. It's stunning, because that's a whole nother podcast. Injuries in sports and
Yeah.
injuries generally, and how kids are being overtrained, not just so that they're not creative and self-directed and peer mentoring, but so that they are having lifelong injuries. You just talked about the
Mhm.
lifelong benefits of sports. How about the lifelong injury from when you were 12
Right.
through
Right.
sport? But this whole issue of ages and stages, I mean, we broke it out because imagination, developing imagination and free play and unstructured and semi-structured play is what you want happening in the ages of 5 to 8, right? And
Mhm.
that's a stage where kids are learning balance and coordination. That's really the key. They're not learning tricky skills like dribbling and passing and scoring, or they're not learning sophisticated sets of movement. They're learning balance and coordination. So adjust to that with
Mhm.
fun games, and also maybe even kicking a ball. Get a ball, and people are doing this better now than they used to be. But get a ball that's the size that your kid can play. I mean, there's a lot of parents love golf for their kids. Well, this woman named Kate Tempesta created a whole way to learn golf that is appropriate, because she was also an early childhood teacher for
Mhm.
kids to play. They're not playing with the big golf. They're not playing with a tiny ball. Big ball, very
Mhm.
small.
That's what I need.
and,
That's
and she creates learning lessons out of it. Like, if they hit this, they see a giraffe, and how do you giraffe is spelled with a G. So it's
Mhm.
it's more along their lines. It's age appropriate.
Yeah.
Then the second stage is a 9 to 11-year-old, and that's where fundamental skills are being taught,
Right.
like dribbling, like passing, interacting with other kids. Then stage three are really sports specific skills, and that's from 12 to 15. And that's
Mhm.
when you're in a team, a regular team or a travel team, and you're really learning um, um, a whole nother level of physical movement. And then the final stage is 16 to 18, where you're in serious training and competition if you so choose to be,
And if
right?
you make it that far, I think that's kind of the point. And
Yep.
really, the next stage is the rest of your life. And so it's like you don't want to cut off that rest of your life because of these negative experiences as a young person. I thought this sentence was phenomenal, talking about when to start. Actually, I really loved the framework of the book, where you took these common questions that parents have, and you're in that world, so you're getting these questions from so many people. So that one of the questions was, my child is 5 years old, a lot of the parents around me are busy choosing a sport or sports for their child, but I'm not sure if it's the right time for him to start organized sports yet. Will he miss out if I don't start him early enough? So first of all, to have that question approach woven throughout the book is fantastic, because every parent has that question. Am I will he miss out, and am I messing up? And the answer that's there is, consider your hesitation a blessing and hold on to it for dear life. What your
Yes,
instincts are telling you is that your child's childhood really matters. Protecting and extending it for as long as possible is one of our biggest responsibilities as parents.
exactly, Jenny. That's so important. And so the answer to the question, well, will they like not have friends because all the other kids are making friends on the travel whatever team, hockey, tennis, whatever, um, a swim team, is no. And you can create your own little group.
You can make a playborhood.
Right. You can do your playborhood where you find other like-minded parents. And so you invite them all to your backyard, or if you're in a city, you take them all to a park and they play and parent. Yes, you're there. Yes, you're important. You are significant. Nobody's saying you're not part of this picture, but huddle with the other parents and hang out and talk about your own stuff with
Mhm.
one eye occasionally glancing over to see, have things really gotten out of hand? Do I need to step in because somebody got hurt? Even if there's a little bit of a fight, don't just jump in and solve it. Maybe just hang back for a second or two, because maybe they'll resolve the fight. And then they're learning all these things we've talked about, throughout this discussion. That's critical.
Wow.
Um, Also, you're your parents' first coach. That's something we talk about. You are your child's first coach, and
Mhm.
they will get much more out of you as a dad with, you know, three thumbs, totally uncoordinated, passing the ball around with them, or a
Yeah,
mom who
that
doesn't
says
know,
sports ball.
right?
Yeah.
Right. A mom who calls sports ball, you know, they will have much more of a loving connection, which is what you want with them,
Mm,
and a nurturing environment doing it with you in those early years. They
yeah.
want to be with you. And
Mhm.
we talk in the book about this parent who, with his 6, 7 year old, was playing basketball. And then suddenly the kid was like, I don't want to go play basketball anymore. And that's how they connected. They always went and played basketball on Saturday because the dad was off and not working. And the mom wanted to do her own things with the other kids. And it was like, okay, so Tommy and I are going to go play basketball. And then suddenly the kid doesn't want to do it anymore. And we talked to this parent and asked him what was going on. And the picture came out that, and the child will tell you if you listen, but parents don't. Something in their auditory system shuts off and they can't hear it. It's being said, but they can't hear it because kids don't speak directly to you. But
Mm,
if you listen to the language, it's clear. It was no longer fun because the parent was instructing all the time. So it wasn't about fooling around and shooting and maybe even
mhm,
learning how to do a layup. It was about, this is how you do a layup. You do it this way. You step off this foot. And you did really good with that, Joey, except you did that part all wrong. And so it was criticism, criticism, criticism. And our we talk about this in the book. For every constructive criticism that you give a child, you need to give them three compliments. And I don't mean like vapid compliments because they hate that. Not,
right.
oh, you were wonderful. Well, how was I wonderful, really, Dad? Did I,
Mm,
what do you base that on? No. So the thing you do with a kid after a game, or when you're teaching them something, is you say, I really like how you pulled the ball back and passed it the other way. That showed that you really were thinking about changing things around and confusing everybody. That was great what you did. And
mhm.
then you can maybe affirm one other thing and then you know, say what you wanted to, if you still think it's
And
necessary.
you know what? I think this is what I can see why you and Kim clicked because there's such a depth there. These are how our conversations go. I mean, we are out of time, but there is so much more here. But I did have that part written down, which is we just say too much,
Yeah,
that you say that in the book. Now, this is why I'm saying this is a book for any parent. You say there's these three simple questions that we ask ourselves before we say the thing. Is it true? Is it kind? And then is it necessary? And in
yeah,
parentheses, I mean, you said almost never. You say learn to hold back, that this is not just a sports lesson, it's a life lesson. And I had written this down too. Cut the number of times you speak up by 50%, then cut that in half again. Really, half, then half again, because the kids, they move on. You have this concept in there that they move on, the outcome doesn't matter too much to them, but they do remember our reactions.
Yes. And that's the
Hmm.
whole, you just nailed the crux of beyond winning, which is it's not about winning. And winning at all costs is what this $17 billion sports industry feeds on. It's what propels it. It's overtraining too early, getting injured. It's structuring and over structuring and dampening creativity, uh, negotiating skills, social empathetic skills. All of this is based on we want to win. This concept that my kid won a national championship at age 9. Oh my God! You know how many national championships there are? Every single sports organization that's selling you calls their moment a national championship. And who cares if your kid won it at 7, 8, 9? What you do by focusing on short-term goals is compromise long-term life skills, long-term love of activity. and and that's the thing. Again, is it 1,000 hours outside, or is it the right kind of 1,000 hours
Hmm.
outside?
Right,
Even
right.
if you're a naturalist and you're all about fishing with your kid, if you over talk, if you over instruct, if you don't let them lose the fish the first few times, if you don't let them, even while they're putting on the worm, maybe get a little tiny cut and then learn how to fix the cut, then you're doing them a disservice. I love what you've said over and over about the book, that it's about life, it's not about
Yes,
sports. Of course, it's that's how we framed it, but
right.
this is what mattered to me as a profilist of athletes, of elite athletes, and as someone who commented on and wrote about and exposed societal ills in sport, was people and life,
Yeah,
not the status of the athlete
yeah.
or the contract that they signed. And
Hmm.
why did I do so? Why was I both lucky circumstantially and did so well with uncovering these investigations? Because sources trusted me. But why did they trust me? Because they saw, as one of them said to me, Luis, you care about people, you care about life. And that's what it was for me. It's about
Yeah,
us and you
right.
and connection. In fact, the overriding thing you want to do with your kid, whether it's in sports, whether it's in any form of activity, outdoors or indoors, is form connection. And if you're connecting through sport and it becomes a critical and overwrought and high pressured and negative, then what you're doing is not just not connecting, you're perhaps ruining
Wow.
the single opportunity you have to build a lasting bridge of love and life with your child throughout their lives.
Hmm.
And even more disconcerting, coloring the way they handle their own kids later. Because we didn't even get into this area,
Wow.
the area of your own sports biography or your own biography generally, and how that um, uh,
Yeah,
can
I think that that goes to the depth of the book. There is a depth here. There's so many topics that we could have talked about, how we're over investing, how why is this making us feel so anxious or angry. There was a quote where you said, I 53%, I thought this was fascinating.
yeah.
53% of parents surveyed after watching their children play soccer reported being angry during the game to some degree. I'm like, why are we doing this? This is half the parents are sitting there. So all of these things, there was a depth to this book that has just sparked so many things in my mind, things to think about. It just blessed my soul. It went right to the top of my sort of arsenal of parenting books, even though, like I said from the beginning, I may not have grabbed it. I just cannot recommend it more highly. Beyond Winning, Smart Parenting in a Toxic Sports Environment. I love even just about how are we defining success? That why are we shoving, you have a sentence of why are we shoving our kids down such a narrowly defined pathway to achievement? And that's a life lesson. It works for sports, but it also works in other areas as well. So Luis, if people are interested in finding the book, um, where can they go? And then also pre-ordering Emotionally Resilient Tweens and Teens, because that's another book that you co-wrote with Kim John Payne that is phenomenal. Where's a good place for people to find these books?
So Amazon has both. Thrift Book has both as well. Um, And you can go through Amazon, you can go through my website, luisfernandoyosa.com works. Simplicity Parenting, you can go to their book their products page, and they have the different books that Kim's written. Kim also wrote a book about games, which is fun for
I had
the,
that one.
right, exactly. And that's fun, and I think it's now divided into 3 parts, but he wrote an original one earlier, and that's for the parent who that's for every parent, but it's certainly for the parent. Well, there's so much more to talk about, and I know we can't
I
talk about
know, I know.
I,
But this one's, can I read the subtitle real quick? Because this
yeah,
actually is fantastic. This
yeah,
is like the life you want to live with your kids. This
right.
particular one, and there may be another one, but this one is called Waldorf Games Handbook for the Early Years, Games to Play and Sing with Children ages 3 to 7. But at the bottom, it says 142 counting, finger, beanbag, circle, clapping, skipping, water, singing, and rainy day games. I mean, that's a book
Awesome,
to have. Yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
it's a great one.
It's like bring back board games, bring back card
Yeah.
games, and bring
Mhm.
back the games in that book.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's one of the things we talk about with the first stage of play, and the second stage too is playing tag, flashlight tag, hide and seek, Foursquare. These are all games which everybody said, oh well, that's okay, but I'd rather my kid be learning how to play the piano or something useful for later life. And wow, it's with those games that they learn
Yeah.
everything about how to interact with each other.
Yeah. And
Everything.
that is the point. That is the point, that in wanting to do what's best for our kids, it's counterintuitive, but less is more, right?
Let them
Like,
anticipate, and
mhm.
let them
Yes.
want to be on that soccer team or that basketball team or that swim team, or want to go on that hike, but tell them it's going to happen when they're old enough, or when they're ready, or
Yeah.
when they've made a little money to help finance it. And
Right.
then they're prepared, and then the anticipation becomes avid, passionate participation, instead of, oh really, we have to go on another hike? Oh
Mhm.
dad, you want me to sign up for another team? I'm kind of tired of what we're already, you know what I mean? It's like, wow,
Mhm.
gift
Yeah.
of boredom, you know, births creativity.
Right.
The detriment of overstuffing is blandness and overwhelm and quitting.
Right. Right. And people can find a lot more information as well on the wholehealthchildsports.com website,
Whole
where
child
you
sports, right? Whole child sports.
wholechildsports.com. You have the 4 stages of play there. You talk
Yes.
about how you can choose a coach. You just have a whole parent's toolkit. So that's also a great place for people to go and to get information. Luis, this has been, what a pleasure. I am so thankful to be able to rub shoulders with you, to have read such a pertinent book, and a book that sparks a lot in your mind. It makes you think, and same with emotionally resilient tweens and teens. It's the same thing. So you're just doing such amazing things in the world, and I hope parents grab both of these and read them with their neighbors, and take these concepts to heart. We always end our, and you kind of touched on this earlier, so I don't know if you'll say the same thing or not, but we always end our podcast with a favorite outdoor childhood memory of yours.
Wow, there are a bunch, because we did, as Waldorf parents, want to go out, but I guess they center around my kids in Maine, and watching them, make pretend fireplaces out of stone, and little pine cone figures, and all of us running into the lake as it started to rain, with no thunder in the neighborhood, and it was windy, and just the joy. In fact, maybe the most poignant one was we were borrowing somebody else's house in Morristown, New Jersey, and the rain came down, and we all, like, you know, undressed to just our underwear, and ran around in the rain, joyfully yelling and screaming. And it was unstructured, it was free. There were adults there, but they were behaving and not telling anybody what to do. In fact, they were completely, wild and relaxed, as the kids were. And that's probably it.
Mm,
My five
it's
my five
beautiful.
kids and me and my wife running around in a storm, or diving into a lake, or
Yeah, water. It's just, yeah, it's such simple things. Take us a few decades back. How about from your childhood?
from my childhood, I spent a lot of time alone, and it was going on my bike in Lima, over to over to a general park and watching the tadpoles in the pond, and then going back a few days later and seeing that they'd grown, into a different stage, and then finally that there were these little weird arms coming out of under their bellies, and then legs coming out, and just riding around my bike with my dog and
Mhm.
looking for somebody to play with. And
Yeah.
wow, we don't let our kids look for somebody to play with. We arrange play dates, but it was like not knowing if I was going to find somebody to play with, and therefore
Mhm.
making new friends and in weird places all over. There was a
Yeah.
freedom to it all.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's
Life was a
beautiful.
neighborhood.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Louise, so much. I certainly hope our paths cross again. This has been such a delightful experience for me. Thank you.
It has been for me too, Jenny. Thank you for having me on, for talking about our two books, and also for what you're doing for the greater society, because this is what makes things worthwhile. If you have something that you love and it's good and you share it, you know,
Mhm. Yeah,
that's how we can
absolutely.
affect change in this society.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you.
Louise.